Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, gave thousands of readings on topics ranging from health to spirituality, and among them, he addressed one of the most painful questions. What happens to those who take their own lives? Cayce's answers are neither filled with condemnation nor simplistic comfort. Instead, he offered a profound and compassionate vision of the soul's journey after suicide. In this video, we explore his fascinating insights into the destiny of these troubled souls and the hope that still lies ahead for them. In the teachings of Edgar Cayce, the moment of death for those who have taken their own lives is not one of immediate peace or resolution. Instead, it is often marked by a profound sense of confusion. Cayce described that the soul, upon separating from the physical body, does not instantly enter a state of higher understanding or bliss. For the person who dies by suicide, the inner turmoil that led to their desperate act persists even beyond the grave. Many such souls find themselves in what Cayce referred to as a grey, misty, and uncertain realm. They are not fully aware that they have transitioned to the afterlife. They still carry with them the thoughts, emotions, and unresolved pain of their earthly existence. This confusion is not a punishment inflicted by an angry deity, but a natural consequence of their spiritual condition at the time of death. Because suicide is often a decision made during a period of intense emotional suffering, despair, hopelessness, rage, or fear, these powerful emotions continue to cloud the soul's perception after physical life ends. The individual may remain tethered to the earthly plane, clinging to places, memories, or people they left behind. Some may not even realize that their body has died, wandering in a dreamlike state, reliving certain events or replaying regrets over and over again. In Cayce's view, the mind is the builder, and thoughts have an energy that shapes the experiences of the soul. The chaos or distress within becomes the environment the soul inhabits. This is why, immediately after suicide, the soul does not find an automatic escape from suffering. Instead, it must work through the very energies and mental states that dominated it at the moment of death. It is a tragic irony. The person sought to end their suffering, but finds that death alone does not erase inner wounds. This period of confusion can last for varying lengths of what we would perceive as time, sometimes only a short while, other times much longer. However, it is never eternal. Cayce was clear: no soul is abandoned, and no soul is left without hope. Eventually, through the help of compassionate spiritual forces, the soul becomes aware of its situation. Recognition is the first step toward healing. The soul begins to realize that it is still alive in a different form, that existence continues, and that new possibilities, though distant and challenging, still lie ahead. After this initial awakening comes a deeper realization. The soul left the physical world before completing the lessons it was meant to learn. Edgar Cayce emphasized that every life is carefully planned before birth, in cooperation with divine forces and spiritual guides. Each soul chooses certain trials, relationships, and experiences in order to grow in wisdom, love, and understanding. Life on earth, despite its hardships, is a school for the soul. Suicide, in Cayce's perspective, interrupts this curriculum. The principle of karma governs this process. Karma is often misunderstood as mere punishment, but Cayce described it more accurately as a system of cause and effect, an educational tool for spiritual evolution. When a soul takes its own life, it leaves many lessons unfinished, and those lessons do not disappear. They remain part of the soul's journey, awaiting fulfillment. Just as a student who drops out of school must eventually return to complete their studies, so too must the soul return to earth to face the same or similar challenges again. However, this return is not a cruel or vengeful sentence. It is rather an act of divine mercy, the soul is given another chance to grow, to overcome despair, and to build the inner strength it once lacked. Often, the circumstances of the next life are arranged to mirror the spiritual issues left unresolved. If loneliness, guilt, or failure triggered the earlier suicide, the soul may be born into conditions where it must learn resilience, self-worth, and trust, but this time with greater inner resources and the support of unseen spiritual companions. It is important to understand that the soul carries forward all the love, wisdom, and good deeds of its past lives as well. Suicide does not erase the good within the soul. It simply halts progress temporarily. The soul's essential divine nature remains intact, waiting to be rediscovered and expressed. Cayce saw every soul as precious and beloved by the Creator, no matter how tragic their earthly end. The journey after suicide is therefore not a journey into eternal damnation, but a complex path of awakening, healing, and ultimate redemption. The soul's pain must be faced, understood, and transformed. This can be a slow and painful process, but it leads eventually to greater compassion, not only for oneself, but for others who suffer. The soul that once despaired may, through these hard-won lessons, become a source of great light and healing for others in future lifetimes. Ultimately, in Cayce's view, the story of a soul who dies by suicide is not a story of failure, but a story of interrupted growth. The divine never gives up on any soul, no matter how lost it may seem. Every mistake becomes a stepping stone toward greater awareness. Every fall, however terrible, becomes an opportunity for a greater rise. In the vision of Edgar Cayce, despite the painful consequences that follow suicide, the soul is never left to wander forever in confusion and despair. A profound truth shines through all his readings on the afterlife. The universe is saturated with divine compassion. There is no abandonment, no eternal punishment. Instead, every soul, even the most tormented, is surrounded by spiritual forces of love, mercy, and healing from the moment they cross into the other side. As the soul begins to awaken to its situation, it often encounters the presence of beings whose purpose is to assist it through this difficult transition. Cayce described these beings as spiritual guides, angels, and even deceased loved ones who have chosen to remain close to the earth plane in order to help those struggling with difficult deaths. These guides do not judge or condemn. They approach the soul with infinite patience, gently offering light into the darkness, offering understanding where there was once only fear and confusion. The process of healing, however, cannot be forced. The soul must be willing to receive help, and at first, many are not. Particularly in cases of suicide, the soul's guilt, shame, or despair may cause it to resist the very love that is reaching out to it. Cayce described this state as a self-imposed isolation, a kind of spiritual hiding born out of fear and self-reproach. Yet the guides do not abandon the soul because of its resistance. They remain nearby, shining like beacons, patiently waiting for the soul's own inner light to flicker back to life. Healing begins in small, almost imperceptible steps. At first, it might be a simple acknowledgement, a realization that love still exists, that forgiveness is possible. It might be the memory of a joyful moment, a glimpse of beauty, or a sudden softening of the inner anguish. These moments of grace are the seeds from which true recovery can grow. The soul starts to remember that it was not created for despair, but for growth, for love, and ultimately for reunion with the divine. Cayce emphasized that no soul is ever alone in its pain. Even when completely unaware of the help offered, the soul is wrapped in spiritual support. Prayer, especially from those still living on earth, can reach across dimensions to offer strength and comfort to those who have passed. In Cayce's readings, he encouraged the living to pray for the dead, particularly those who died troubled deaths, because the vibrations of sincere love and compassion have a real, tangible effect in the unseen realms. The prayers of a mother, a friend, or even a stranger can serve as a healing balm to the anguished soul, nudging it closer to acceptance and peace. Part of the healing also involves the soul's gradual confrontation with its earthly life. Cayce spoke of a life review, a period after death when the soul re-experiences the key moments of its incarnation, not with the harsh judgment of an outside authority, but with the clear, honest vision of its own higher self. The soul sees where it gave love, where it withheld it, where it grew in strength, and where it faltered in fear. For the soul who died by suicide, this life review is often particularly poignant. They come to understand, perhaps for the first time, the impact of their departure on those left behind, the grief, the unanswered questions, the ripple effects of sorrow. Yet even this painful awareness is not meant to be a punishment. It is a doorway to greater compassion. The soul, seeing its life in the light of truth, begins to awaken to a deeper understanding of the sacredness of every experience, even the painful ones. In this way, the soul's own suffering can become a source of wisdom. Having tasted despair, it can develop a profound empathy for others who suffer. Having once believed itself alone, it can now become a beacon of comfort for others in future lives. The role of the spiritual guides during this process is crucial. They act not only as comforters, but also as teachers. They help the soul to see possibilities where once there was only despair. They offer visions of future opportunities for growth, hinting at the joy that lies ahead when the soul is ready to take up its journey again. Cayce often described these guides as beings who themselves had once struggled deeply in their own incarnations, and who now chose, out of love, to assist others in their healing. In this sense, the spiritual world is not a realm of cold, distant powers, but a living community of souls bound together by experiences of suffering and redemption. There is also, according to Cayce, a higher aspect of the soul, the higher self, that never loses contact with the divine. Even when the conscious part of the soul is lost in pain and confusion, the higher self remains aligned with God, quietly calling the wounded part home. Healing, therefore, is not about earning back divine favor. It is about remembering and reclaiming the love that was never truly lost. In time, with help and patience, the suicidal soul begins to heal. It regains strength, clarity, and a renewed desire to fulfill its purpose. It prepares itself for another incarnation, one in which it can face its unresolved challenges with new wisdom and resilience. But even before returning to Earth, the soul may spend considerable time in realms of learning and service, helping others, studying spiritual truths, and deepening its connection with the Source. Thus, Cayce's vision of the afterlife for those who die by suicide is not a vision of condemnation, but of an ongoing journey toward healing and wholeness. It acknowledges the reality of suffering without diminishing the greater truth. That every soul is beloved, every wound can be healed, and every story, no matter how tragic, is in the end a story of hope. In Edgar Cayce's teachings, the journey of the soul does not end in the afterlife. Healing, while profound, is only the beginning. True growth requires action, experience, and the facing of new challenges. For souls who have taken their own lives, the next step is often reincarnation, a return to the physical world, not as punishment, but as an opportunity for redemption, for the fulfillment of lessons once abandoned, and for the soul's ultimate triumph over the despair that once consumed it. Cayce explained that before each reincarnation, the soul works closely with spiritual advisors and guides to carefully plan the circumstances of its next life. Nothing is random. The soul chooses its parents, its body, its environment, all with the intention of confronting and mastering the particular weaknesses and wounds that led to its previous struggles. If loneliness, fear, or a deep sense of failure had once overwhelmed the soul, it may now choose a life that brings similar feelings, but with new opportunities to respond with greater strength, compassion, and resilience. This is not an easy path. Often the soul will face immense challenges early in life, conditions that mirror the unresolved pain of the past. It might struggle with depression, rejection, illness, or poverty. It might feel an intense yearning for meaning and belonging. These hardships are not signs of being cursed. They are the chosen battlegrounds, where the soul has the chance to grow stronger than ever before. The tests of life are opportunities, forged not by a cruel universe, but by the soul's own deeper wisdom and longing to evolve. The soul is not sent back to earth alone or unprepared. Embedded within each new incarnation are hidden resources, latent talents, intuitive wisdom, and soul memories that, even if not consciously remembered, influence the individual's actions and decisions. These inner gifts can serve as lifelines, moments of intuition, flashes of hope, encounters with people who awaken a sense of possibility. In Cayce's view, the divine provides countless opportunities for the soul to awaken, to heal, and to move forward. Sometimes the soul may even choose to come into life with a mission to help others who are suffering. Having known the depth of despair, it is uniquely equipped to recognize and comfort others in pain. In this way, the wound that once brought destruction can be transformed into a source of profound service and healing. A soul that once fell under the weight of its burdens may now become a teacher of resilience, a beacon of hope to others who are struggling. Yet, Cayce warned that the challenges of reincarnation are real and the risks are serious. If the soul succumbs again to despair without learning the deeper lessons, the cycle of suffering can repeat across multiple lifetimes. Free will is never taken away. The soul must choose, at every step, to respond with courage, faith, and love, rather than fear and escape. The spiritual guides assist, but they cannot make the soul's choices for it. Growth is a personal and sacred act of will. Importantly, Cayce stressed that the mercy of God is infinite. There is no arbitrary limit to the number of chances a soul is given. The soul is never damned because of a mistake, no matter how grave. Reincarnation after suicide is not a sentence of endless suffering, but a testament to the endless patience and love of the divine. As long as the soul longs to return to the light, the path is open. In some readings, Cayce suggested that some souls might carry a deep, subconscious memory of a past suicide into their next life. They may feel inexplicable fears, chronic depression, or a vague but powerful sense of guilt with no clear origin. These buried memories can shape behavior in mysterious ways. However, by facing these feelings with awareness, compassion, and spiritual discipline, the soul can gradually unravel the old patterns and free itself from the invisible chains of the past. The environment into which the soul reincarnates is also carefully selected to maximize growth. Family relationships are particularly important. Often, the soul will choose to be born among individuals with whom it has karmic ties, parents, siblings, or partners who will, through love or through difficulty, trigger the necessary lessons. The betrayals, abandonments, and conflicts of one life can be reworked into opportunities for forgiveness, understanding, and profound transformation in the next. Cayce emphasized that suffering itself is not the goal. The purpose of reincarnation is not to inflict more pain, but to enable the soul to transform pain into wisdom and strength. The soul is meant to learn how to love more deeply, how to serve more selflessly, and how to trust more completely in the divine plan. The trials of life are like fires that refine gold, burning away illusions, fears, and selfishness, revealing the shining essence beneath. Over many lifetimes, the soul gradually masters the lessons it once found unbearable. What was once seen as impossible becomes achievable. The despair that once seemed overwhelming becomes the soil from which compassion, courage, and wisdom grow. The soul, once broken by life's hardships, becomes strong enough to help others endure theirs. Redemption is not an abstract concept. It is a lived, breathed reality that unfolds through experience, effort, and grace. One of the most beautiful aspects of Cayce's vision is that no suffering is wasted. Every tear shed, every moment of pain, every small act of courage in the face of fear, all are gathered into the soul's eternal treasure. Nothing is forgotten. Nothing is meaningless. Even the dark paths we walk contribute to the fullness of our being. Eventually, the soul reaches a state of spiritual maturity where it no longer needs to reincarnate. Having learned its lessons, balanced its karmic debts, and awakened to its divine nature, it moves beyond the cycle of birth and death. It enters into fuller, conscious union with God, contributing its unique experiences and gifts to the unfolding of the greater cosmic plan. Thus, Cayce's teachings offer not only an explanation for the fate of those who die by suicide, but also a profound hope that no soul is ever lost, that redemption is always possible, and that love, the eternal law of the universe, patiently guides every soul back to its rightful home. In Edgar Cayce's profound and compassionate vision, no matter how dark the path a soul may tread, no matter how tragic the choices it may make, the ultimate destiny of every soul remains the same: reunion with the divine. The journey may be long, it may be filled with suffering and setbacks, but it is never truly derailed. Every soul, without exception, is drawn ever upward, ever homeward, by the irresistible pull of its Creator's love. Cayce described the soul as a spark of the divine, an individualized expression of God's consciousness. It is made of light, born of love, and its deepest longing is always to return to the source from which it came. Even when a soul seems lost, even when it chooses despair or violence against itself, it cannot extinguish its true nature. The flame may be buried under layers of pain, fear, and ignorance, but it still burns, however faintly, calling the soul back toward healing, understanding, and union. The path back to God is not simple. It involves many stages of growth. Souls must pass through cycles of birth and death, through worlds both physical and spiritual, learning, failing, succeeding, and slowly awakening to the deeper truths of existence. The journey is tailored uniquely for each soul, based on its own choices and its own needs. There is no single path, no rigid blueprint. Each soul writes its own story, and yet all stories ultimately converge in the same divine conclusion. For the soul that has experienced the pain of suicide, the journey back to the divine often brings an especially deep understanding of compassion. Having known despair so intimately, such a soul, once healed and whole, can develop a profound tenderness toward the suffering of others. Cayce hinted that some of the greatest souls, those who shine brightest in service and wisdom, are those who once walked through the darkest valleys. Their empathy, their strength, and their unshakable love for humanity are born not from avoiding pain, but from transforming it. Reunion with the divine is not merely a return to a place. It is a transformation of consciousness. The soul must become like that which it seeks to unite with. It must awaken fully to its divine nature, shedding the illusions of separation, fear, selfishness, and hatred. This is not a passive process. It requires effort, courage, forgiveness, and above all, love. Love for oneself, for others, and for the divine itself. In the higher realms of existence, as Cayce described, souls continue their growth through service and creativity. They become co-creators with God, participating in the unfolding of new worlds, new experiences, and new expressions of divine beauty. Far from being a static heaven where souls rest idly, the higher planes are vibrant, dynamic realms where love is not just felt, but actively expressed in endless acts of giving and creation. Cayce also spoke of the soul's final destiny in terms of a great homecoming, a joyful reuniting not only with God, but with all other souls. Separation is an illusion of the lower worlds. In truth, all souls are interconnected, facets of one great whole. As a soul draws closer to the divine, it also draws closer to its brothers and sisters in spirit. Every act of healing, every lesson learned, every burden overcome contributes to the collective upliftment of all creation. For the soul that once believed itself hopeless, this destiny is a staggering revelation. No matter how far it strayed, no matter how deep its wounds, it was never truly alone, never truly beyond hope. Divine love has been present through every moment of suffering, every fall, every tear. The soul's struggles are not seen by God as failures, but as sacred steps in a journey whose end is guaranteed, the return to joy, to light, to oneness. The process of full reunion with the divine is gradual, like the dawning of a new day. There are moments of awakening, flashes of understanding, growing periods of peace and unity, and then long stretches of work and growth. Even when the soul is beyond the need for reincarnation, its journey continues in realms of pure spirit. There is always more to discover, more beauty to create, more love to give. In this vision, no soul is ever lost in the eternal sense. Cayce rejected the idea of eternal damnation. To him, the only reality that lasts forever is the reality of God's love. Darkness, evil, and suffering are temporary conditions, intense and real, but ultimately destined to be overcome. God's patience is infinite. No mistake, no fall, no despair is greater than the healing power of divine love. Thus, even for the soul that ends its life in anguish, the road is not closed. It is longer, perhaps, and more difficult, but it is still open, lit by the compassion of spiritual guides, the prayers of loved ones, and the quiet, steady call of the soul's own deepest longing. In time, through many lifetimes, through countless acts of courage and grace, the soul will rise. It will learn to love itself as God loves it. It will learn to forgive itself as it has already been forgiven. It will learn to see, with eyes cleared of sorrow, the great truth, that it has always been loved, always been precious, always been destined for joy. Cayce's message, then, is not one of fear, but of hope. Even the darkest chapters of a soul's story are only part of a greater narrative, one that leads inexorably toward healing, wisdom, and union with the divine. Suicide does not end the story. It is a painful page, yes, but not the final one. The soul's book continues to be written, guided by hands seen and unseen, until at last it stands in the full light of God, whole, radiant and free.